Bringing testimony before this august committee brings me no joy today, nor can elegant words disguise the ugly reality that confronts not only Jewish Canadians, but in a fundamental way, all Canadians. Forgive the candor of my remarks. There is a crisis of Jew hatred in this country. The anti-Semitism is emanating from the extreme right, the radical left, and to be truthful, from segments of the Muslim and Arab community. A bitter irony, given that they too experience discrimination and hate. The Prime Minister called the recent rise of anti-Semitism terrifying, and he's right. And the statistics are staggering. Since October 7th, there has been a 93% rise in hate crimes in Toronto, the majority of which have been directed at the Jewish community. In Vancouver, reports of anti-Semitism increased 62% in 2023 over 2022. 70% of those occurred subsequent to October 7. In Ottawa, the nation's capital, the overall number of hate-related incidents rose nearly 20% in 2023. And while Jews only comprise about 1.4% of the population, incidents affecting the Jewish community in Ottawa comprised 27% of reported hate-related incidents in 2023. I could, of course, mention that we've recently learned that the two young people charged with terrorism offenses earlier this year were planning to set bombs at a Jewish event here on Parliament Hill, or that our former Minister of Justice and Human Rights activist, Irwin Cotler, required 24/7 RCMP protection, having been the target of terrorist assassination plots alleged by Iranian agents for his outspoken criticisms of that regime. I could mention Jewish schools in Montreal being shot at, or bomb threats targeting Jewish schools in Toronto, or synagogues across the country picketed and vandalized. Demonstrations taking place in Jewish neighborhoods for the sole purpose of intimidating its residents. Jewish-owned businesses are defaced, damaged, boycotted, and vandalized. In our streets, we hear glorification of terrorism and violence. On Parliament Hill, the very heart of Canada's democracy, on April 18th, we heard praise for the October 7 attack by Hamas and its affiliates that murdered 1,200 people in Israel. Both the National Post and the Globe and Mail reported statements including, "Our resistance and our attacks are proof that we are almost free. Long live October 7. Long live the Intifada. Long live every form of resistance." On October 28 in Montreal, a controversial imam was given the microphone, and in Arabic he said, "Allah, take care of these Zionist aggressors. Allah, identify them all, then exterminate them, and don't spare any of them." Shockingly, we subsequently learned that he was not going to be charged. And still in Montreal, yells of death to the Jews were heard in front of a Jewish school. The Jewish Community Center was under siege, with people not able to go out for hours, and then finally being escorted by police through the back door. It's gotten so bad that the authorities were so passive, and the only solution the community could turn to for relief was the courts, where they sought injunctions to protect our institutions, an extraordinary recourse. These injunctions were granted and extended twice. These injunctions that were followed by lawyers on behalf of our community were necessary because of a failure of civil authorities. And the situation on campus for Jewish students is especially disturbing. We see hate symbols such as swastikas defacing campus property. Kippah-wearing students are spat on and called dirty Jew. Mezuzot, the holy Jewish scriptural parchment housed in distinctive cases affixed to doorposts, are being torn down in residences. Discriminatory remarks in lectures claiming Jews harvest the organs or blood of non-Jews, and even barefaced threats of violence against Jewish students. At the threat of detainment and arrest, peaceful rabbis, like Rabbi Adam Shire of Shar Shemaim in Montreal, and Jewish journalists being directed to move by police, while the haters are free to spew their venom. Students and faculty share with me that they avoid reporting incidents due to fear of retribution by both their professors and peers. When reports are made about potential safety concerns, we've heard numerous instances where Jewish students and faculty were advised, stay home, rather than address the root cause of the matter. Student unions and educators on Ontario campuses have made statements supporting and celebrating violence and discrimination. We've witnessed campus protests disguised as legitimate forms of political activism, only to morph into riots, while spreading hateful and violent rhetoric directed towards Jews, as they rob students of their educational rights and professors of their teaching commitments. Let me be clear, academic freedom and freedom of expression are pillars of our values as a country and as a society, both on and off campus. But when lines are crossed and policies are not enforced, it shakes the trust of our community, our trust in the system that we support. At this point, words are not enough. We've had enough of those. We need action from government. And let me offer, in conclusion, just a few brief recommendations that I'd be more than happy to expand on in the rest of our time together. Number one, it is urgent that the government convene a national forum on combating hate crimes, terrorism, and anti-Semitism, bringing together federal, provincial, and municipal leaders, together with law enforcement, to coordinate efforts and ensure consistent application of not just anti-hate legislation, but of the law in general when it comes to protecting vulnerable and at-risk communities. Number two, we have to strengthen enforcement of Canada's criminal laws. And I believe Mark Sandler, a panelist whom you'll hear from soon, has some very specific ideas on what that should look like. But in general, we have to ensure that charges, including for criminal intimidation, unlawful assembly, and hate propaganda, are laid against those promoting violence or inciting hate against Jews. We have to enhance judicial and law enforcement training, modeled on past initiatives like the anti-intimidation protections of Bill C-3, to equip officials with the tools to recognize and address anti-Semitism while utilizing the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism adopted by the federal government and many of the provinces. Number four, we have to bolster community safety programs by establishing dedicated liaisons within law enforcement, creating specialized hate crime units, and improving intelligence sharing to address rising threats. And finally, we have to address radicalization and extremism, including banning terrorist symbols and cracking down on those glorifying terrorism, which emboldens extremists and undermines Canadian security. Honorable Senators, the time for action is now. And I close where I opened. This is not only about Jews. We're the low-hanging fruit. the proverbial canary in the coal mine. For as the saying goes, what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews.